People of progressive opinion the world over, I think, do have to stand up for those values of tolerance and respect for diversity and difference. And there is more of an obligation on us now, no matter how difficult and no matter sometimes how controversial or unpopular it may be, to be beacons of hope for these values that we all hold so dear.
I think we are touching a nerve with the American people who understand that establishment politics is just not good enough. We need bold changes. We need a political revolution.
Please clap.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Commoners Podcast. We're doing things a little bit differently today, and by that I mean this is our final episode. Don't worry, though, we're starting a new project. We're launching a new podcast called Absurdistan. We just wanted to take about 10 minutes today to go over why we're changing, what we learned from Commoners, and what the format of the new podcast is going to look like. So to start off, Adam, could you give us your thoughts on what we learned from Commoners and where we want to take this in the future?
Yeah, no problem. I think it's important that people know that Commoners actually started out as a project created by unprepared and inexperienced people. It was a reaction to Trump's election. Both John and I were somewhat disappointed in the result, and to be able to vent our frustrations, particularly to each other, living in different countries, it was good therapy. But we learned a lot during our time doing Commoners. So, for instance, we learned to value information over opinion. We found that our two most popular episodes were the Dutch election special and the French election special. We got a lot of really positive feedback on those episodes, and the reason for that was because it was information heavy. It was easy to follow, it was fairly well structured, it was informative and it was useful, and it was a little bit unusual. Not many people in the English-speaking world in particular would have gone into depth as much as we did on the Dutch elections. So it's important that moving forward that we're more informative and less opinionated. Another thing that we learned, I think John and I would quite heartily agree on this, is our level of maturity has risen as we've done the podcast. It was far too easy to become hyperbolic and paint the side that we disagreed with in an unfair light. Because of the relative immaturity, it was also difficult to keep opinion at bay as well. And again, that's one of our biggest things moving forward, is to keep it informative and less opinionated. So it was really easy to make snide comments and to name call. The balance of humour, we never really found that, and there was a certain lack of discipline that just led us to making bad and poor comments. The other thing was actually consistency. We started really well. The time constraints at the beginning of the project meant that we had to do it every 2 weeks. But because of that, it was difficult to make a habit out of it, and it was difficult to keep the schedule, especially as we get further and further into it. We tried to fill the extra weeks with political animals. You might remember the 20-minute segments that we would do individually, but those just never hit the quality that we wanted, and the experience or lack of experience showed through there. So with the new project, we'll be moving hopefully definitely to a week-by-week basis, not only for good listening, but also for our own habits. And the final thing I think that I would say that we've learned is that we overpromised a lot. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, in that I think John in particular, I tend to be less so, is quite idealistic, and so he has these grand ideas and visions to move his projects forward. But it was just difficult to actually put them in place with the limited time that we had. So with those 4 things on my side, John, do you have anything else to add? Things that we learned from Commoners?
I think the biggest thing for me was time. So it's a big commitment to expect somebody to listen to us ramble on for 2 hours. We weren't very disciplined with keeping things to a set time per episode, which I think would be really important for us moving forward. Moving forward, we want to keep things to just about an hour, just for ease of listening and ease of you putting it into your schedule. It's a hell of a lot easier to listen to an hour podcast on your commute than it is 2 hours. I think that we didn't have the quality and clarity of audio that we could have. We didn't put a lot of preparation into the episodes that we did. A lot of them were just off the cuff. So we didn't have a lot of copious notes for most of the episodes, and I think that will help us to not ramble as much, not say the word and filler words. We'll just be more intentional about the way that we speak. And I think that as well, we need better editing, and that really kind of comes down to me. I've done a lot of research on editing techniques for podcasts to make them more listenable, and I think that ultimately we'll be able to put a better product out there. I think our ultimate goal is to have a product that is informative, less opinionated, easy to listen to, easy to fit into your schedule, and that we're proud enough of to share on our Facebook walls so that our family can listen to it without cringing the entire time. So I think that's what we're aiming for. We're not going to try to overpromise here. I think this is definitely something that we can deliver, and we hope that you join us. This is really what this episode is about, announcing this project and hoping to get some crossover subscribers from our Commoners project. We'll be coming out with an episode, and we hope that you join us, our fellow Absurdistanis.
That's right. This will be the last Commoners episode, as John said. We will actually put the first Absurdistan episode in this feed, but then after that, this feed is dead. So you'll have to resubscribe to us elsewhere. And now for the first time, we're introducing Absurdistan. So we do hope that you come and join us. This is a new political podcast that is more specifically political than the Commoners podcast, which tended to have aspects of philosophy and religion and science in it from time to time. Those aspects will still be there just simply because they are things that we enjoy talking about and they naturally come out of us, but it will be more politically centric. We'll have a political structure that covers news from the weeks as well as a specific topic. And every month as well, one of the weeks will be dedicated to a specific deep dive where we'll both dive into a project or a report or a specific political issue that's going on in the world.
Yes, and we're going to structure the episodes more clearly. We will have 2 15-minute segments to kick off the episodes. One being a story from the United States, one being a story from Europe, and we'll have some discussion about those stories. Both those segments will probably be about 15 minutes each. Then after that, we'll actually have a 10 or 15-minute segment where one of us gives a report about an issue that's going on, and that will be more in-depth and produced, and it will sound more, hopefully, professional. And then the final 15 minutes will be time for us to talk about upcoming political issues that you need to be watching out for this week, be it voting deadlines in the Senate, elections that are coming up that you should be watching, possible war with Russia and Syria, anything that's really happening that you need to pay attention to the next week. So we think that format will be better to listen to, more informative, and just kind of keep us to an hour. I think that's kind of our sweet spot of the best content that we've made. And lastly, before we go, we're just going to do a quick discussion of the name and how we came up with it. And it doesn't ring necessarily of a political podcast, but we thought based on our Commoners project and our personal philosophies, it really has a special meaning for both of us, I guess.
Yeah, so there are 2 major aspects of why it's going to be called what it is. And the first one primarily is just because we live in an absurd time. Need I remind you that there is a reality TV star currently in the White House, or that the UK is leaving the largest market in the world voluntarily? Like, these are strange things to be happening. We're not necessarily living in the dark timeline, if you want to think about it, but we are probably living in one of the more absurd timelines. There are just strange things happening, and the reason for voting for Trump or voting for Brexit aren't necessarily bad or wrong, but we do need to understand these things better, and they have led to unusual outcomes. There are Nazis. Like, we have a Nazi problem that hasn't happened in 70 odd years. So it's just an absurd time to be politically active. Yeah, it's an odd time to be alive, and the political things happening around us are just simply absurd. The second reason why it's called Absurdistan is that philosophical element that I think John in particular quite likes.
Absurdist is nested in that word itself, and I fancied that philosophy, actually. I would consider myself an absurdist because being a nihilist is frankly a little bit too depressing for me. So I've really fallen in love with Camus' philosophy, and it's come to mean a lot for me, especially when we've discussed postmodernism in our more philosophical Commoners episodes. So I've kind of taken on that label for myself as an absurdist, and it just dovetailed so nicely with the world being more absurd than it has been in quite some time. Join us on this rock that we call Absurdistan.
I really like the idea that it sounds like a country as well. So I'm looking forward to welcoming our Absurdistanis and stamping their passports. And the last thing that I think we both want to say is thank you to our listeners. If you're listening to this, then you still have us in your feed for a reason which I don't understand or know why, but nonetheless, thank you. This wouldn't have really taken off in the way that it did. We had about 200 listeners per episode at our height, which is really good for a small, unprepared, inefficient, inexperienced little podcast. So we hope to take lessons that we've learned from this first project and move it to the second project, Absurdistan, and hopefully take it from there. So
you'll still be able to access all of the old Commoners episodes on iTunes. They'll still be on YouTube, and eventually maybe we'll upload them into the Absurdistan feed just so they'll be there for posterity if you ever want to go back and listen to our awkward beginning stages.
Yeah, legacy content.
My passion is biology, so I can only refer to Commoners as the nymph stage of our podcast development.
Very good. It definitely showed.
It definitely showed. So hopefully we'll be a little bit more professional going forward. Anyway, for the last time, signing off from Commoners Podcast. Please, as always, stay informed. If you're interested in this new project, please be sure to follow us on Twitter at Absurdistanis. We are also on YouTube as Absurdistan with an exclamation point. Be sure you also check out our brand new website, absurdistanis.com. That's absurdistanis.com, where we post all our podcast episodes and host forums for discussion on those episodes and any other topics you might find interesting. Links to all these are in the description of this episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.